Woohoo!
So in our last episode, we talked about the mystery of being a little bit. And really on some level, that was an introduction into a philosophy we call existentialism.
Yeah.
And, you know, one of the cool things about existentialism is it helps you sort of feel the power of philosophy. But I want to get a little more formal into what existentialism is and define it a little bit and help us unpack it a little bit so that we can kind of understand, you know, where it fits in terms of philosophy in general.
Okay.
So I want to start off with a term that, in a more formal way, describes existentialism. And it's going to sound a little philosophically mumbo-jumbo kind of thing, but I want you to try to see if you can guess what this might mean. A tenet of existentialism is that existence precedes essence.
What does that mean?
Well, let's unpack it a little bit, right? Existence, right? That is the fact that you exist, or, you know, you're existing, precedes your essence. That is, your essence of what it is to be you comes about after you already exist.
Okay.
So in that sense, existentialism rejects the notion that our essence is defined before we ever exist.
Yeah.
And that actually contradicts with a number of philosophical schools in some ways. Talk to me about religion's view of our essence and our existence and which comes first.
A lot of times, like in Christianity, it's always said that God has like a plan for you. And so it's almost like your personality and choices and you were like written about, like were like chosen before you were even born. And then in some other religions that like believe in reincarnation, there's obviously like the soul continually being reincarnated into a new body. There's like the essence has existed long before you.
So clearly religion, that is at least most religions, talk about your essence being defined by God or your previous existence or something prior to you ever existing in this world.
Definitely.
Talk to me about biology.
Well, I guess in terms of like genetics, there is like a part of you that existed even before you existed, because like what your parents were get passed down to.
So genetic theory is clearly an example of your essence preceding your existence.
Yeah.
And sociobiologists would take that even further and describe most, if not all, human motives in terms of how they promote your genetic propagation. What about psychology?
Well, I think in psychology, bits of your personality and like your brain, they are impacted by your environment, and that's like generally happens after you exist. But like people are different, like just straight from when they're born. They don't all start out as a blank slate. Like parts of your brain are already like decided upon even before you start to exist.
Particularly in psychiatric schools, we're very clearly defined by our brain functions and our brain evolution prior to our existence. Even if you don't take that sort of strict biological view of what we are as a human, if you look at like psychoanalytic schools, it always harkens back to your childhood, in your infancy, and those are all well-defined and define you before you ever really have the ability to sort of think of who or what you are.
In your early years, even if you're not like fully aware of yourself, you still are in existence, right?
Well, it depends on what you mean by you, to some degree. Do you know what I mean?
I was just kind of thinking that by existence, it meant the actual act of existing, like your body, your consciousness, whatever, no matter how developed it was. And then by essence, we were talking about who we actually are, and so maybe the essence would come after then, even if it was.
Yeah, you're right. You could describe it in both ways. Well, so then let's talk about a third branch of science, sociology. What's its view of, you know, your role in choosing what you are?
Sociology believes that, like, the majority of you and your personality and your choices and, like, the acts that you make are all given to you by society and, like, society's expectations, society what society thinks is right or wrong or normal, your own personal world that you started to exist in, and what type of society that you've been exposed to.
So I guess we have some strong philosophies, right, both religious and scientific, that talk about our essence preceding our existence. Are those philosophies correct?
I don't really believe in the religious ones, and that's largely up to belief anyway. But I think in terms of the more scientific ones, like psychology, sociology, just general biology, a part of them definitely holds truth, and like they're scientifically accurate. So there are like bits and pieces of you that you have no choice over whatsoever, and most of you it's like shaped by just the world around you. I think that when talking about essence, it's sort of more expansive than that. I think that like your essence, which is like you as a whole, it like starts like rolling along, like picking everything out it, but like that only happens really after you start existing.
That tension you're unpacking a little bit is somewhat similar to the way that existentialists would unpack that. And I think this is a common misperception in existentialism. I don't think that the original purveyors of those philosophies were anti-science. The way the existentialist would describe you coming into this world is, at the point that you are aware of who you are and you begin to ask these sort of existential questions, you have been thrown into your own being. In fact, they would describe that as being sort of this moment, right? Where you're like, whoa, here I am.
Yeah, I think a lot of people describe like how like when they're like younger, like they weren't aware of their like self and their consciousness for a while, and they like remember this moment when they really became aware of like that they were a person that like existed.
And there's another, I think, interesting and important term in existentialism that came out a little bit later, which they call sedimentation, in which they describe your previous decisions and your previous life and existence creating these artifacts in your personality and your being that then become kind of inhibitors to your ability to recreate yourself or to create yourself anew. But the thing that the existentialists would say, what kind of being, though, do you think that all those processes create at some point for the existentialists?
A person that's able to make their own choices.
Right. The existentialists would say that all of those things are true. All of those biological and sociological and psychological mechanisms are descriptive. But the end result of all of that is a being that has the ability and, even more importantly, the obligation to choose what it is going to become. Do you think that's true?
Yeah, I think that's definitely true. As a person, of course you have like a personality, of course you have like people around you that have shaped who you are and who you've become, but at the same time, you can shape who you become. Like, even if those choices are made out of a person that you were made into by everyone around you, they're still your choices. And if you is just some sort of like cobbled together person out of a bunch of different things, that's still you. And you can change that you, and you can morph that you however you want to, just by existing with that reality of yourself and making new choices every single day.
I think that religion actually has a strong conception of this, particularly like in evangelical Christianity. You can go back further, right, in theology and say that, I think evangelical Christians would say God created us with free will.
Mm-hmm.
Can you describe how the moment of decision, or how there is moments of decision in evangelical Christianity that end up defining who you are or your existence? Maybe that's a little bit of a hard question. Yeah. In evangelical Christianity, for example, is there that notion that you can choose your essence?
Well, I think it's complicated because obviously they believe that like you have a soul and that like your path fits into like God's story. But also they would say that like sinning was the very first choice that people made. They were granted free will, and so they can make their own choices, and even if it will eventually fit into like a larger picture, it's still them making that choices, and they can choose to do whatever they want. Although they would probably choose to do specific things that they like think God would like rather.
I agree that in Orthodox Christianity, our essence has been defined by a previous decision of our ancestors, that being the decision to sin.
Yeah.
So in Christianity, we are born as fallen beings or sinful beings. What's the good news of Christianity? What's the gospel?
You can be forgiven.
By what?
Praying to Jesus.
It's a choice. You can choose to become a Christian. You're not born a Christian. In evangelical Christianity, you have to choose. And it's not ambiguous. I mean, that's the moment of baptism. And that conflict between the determination of God and God being in control and God's will and free will is actually something that has defined divisions and discussions in Christianity throughout history. But Protestant evangelicalism has certainly fallen on the side of the existentialists to some degree, in that you choose to define your essence at that point, that you choose to accept Jesus or whatever that may be. In existentialism, we call these existential moments. Do you know those moments like in your life where it's like, when we go around making decisions all the time, right? But most of those decisions aren't particularly consequential. But there are those moments where you really feel the weight of your being kind of being determined in that moment by what you decide. Have you ever felt that?
It's like, if I make this choice, then it could change a lot of stuff.
Let's turn to a classic question. If you could define any question as like the philosophical question, what would you guess?
What's the meaning to life?
What's the meaning of life? So talk to me about the meaning of life. And that question in and of itself. Does it presuppose existence or essence being first?
Yeah, by asking the question, is there a meaning to life? It's sort of like saying that there is a meaning to life. By saying that essence comes after existence, you're saying that life, as we know it, which is like existence, and which other philosophies think that comes along with essence, it's sort of saying that by existing, you haven't decided anything yet. Like the meaning of life into existence comes before you, and when you can actually decide what that meaning is. So it's like, by saying that you and your essence come after existence and life, it's almost like saying that there is no real meaning to life as in existence, and that you, after you've already lived some and you've come into yourself and you've realized your essence, make the choice of what life means, but like not really what life means, like what you mean and what your essence means.
Okay, so I think that you went both sides of this and you kind of unpacked this for yourself a little bit. So now we're going to go through this again. We're going to do it in a more question-answer kind of way.
Okay.
Right? So when people ask, what is the meaning of life? Is that even a legitimate question in existentialism?
I don't think so. Not really. Existence is life, and life is existence. So by saying that your essence comes after your existence, it's almost like saying there is no real meaning to life. The only meaning comes after life itself.
Well, and what about most religions? Do you say that what is the meaning of life has an answer?
Yeah, I think in most religions, the meaning of life is to be a part of that religion.
Well, and what about the sciences we discussed?
I mean, yeah, for them, I think for scientists, the meaning of life is just pretty basically to continue living and to reproduce.
And so, I guess, what would an existentialist say about someone who said, what is the meaning of life?
I think that they would say the meaning to life is just to continue on existing and to shape yourself a little bit as a person.
So try that again, but talk about it in terms of meaning. How would an existentialist define meaning then? Answer the question as an existentialist. What is the meaning of life?
I think that life itself doesn't really have a true meaning. To find the meaning in your existence, you have to look to your essence instead.
You have to look to your essence instead? That sounds like just the opposite of existentialism.
I don't know.
Listen, it seems like you're nervous about this stuff, but don't be. Let's talk about real life. Where does meaning come from?
You.
So does meaning exist or is it created? So how would an existentialist answer the question, what is the meaning of life?
I think that they would say just like essence comes after existence, the meaning to life comes after life itself, and the meaning is just what you decide it is. Because meaning ultimately doesn't really just exist and come into with life. It's something that you create in a way.
Well, I think that's exactly how an existentialist would answer that question. That's an easy thing, though, maybe a little bit. Let me ask you a harder question. How would you answer the question, what is the meaning of life?
Before we started this episode, I would hear everyone be like, oh, like the meaning of life is to do this or to do that, and I would always disagree with that. I might even have like a little bit of an existentialist mindset, because the meaning to life is the meaning of your life, and everybody's life is different. So the meaning to someone else's life could be fulfilling one of their dreams. The meaning to someone else's life could be falling in love. The meaning to someone else's life the meaning to people's lives could be a million different things. And everything that people say the meaning of life is equally correct and incorrect, because the meaning to life doesn't really exist as a full, fleshed out thing for every single person. But whatever they decide the meaning of life is in a way the meaning to their life, because that's what they decide has most meaning. For me, my personal meaning to life is just to be happy.
I think that's the existentialist view. Not necessarily to be happy, but that we create that meaning by our decisions and our thoughts and our beliefs. Can you see how the essence versus existence question is so critical to what it means to be a human being? And I think that you can see that, if you really believe that what you're supposed to be is predefined, that can create a great deal of psychological tension, right? And you can see this in like trivial ways where people talk about like having to find a partner for life. And some people like really believe like that's what it means to be human. I mean, you see the pressure of that on young people and old people and everyone who doesn't have a partner. I mean, I think that a lot of the tensions and the struggles we feel in life come from that sort of essentialist view. Talk about existentialism, like having to define or having the obligation to choose meaning, to create meaning. That seems like that could be a little anxiety producing as well.
Yeah, it definitely is. Because when you think that you have your past laid out for you, it's easy to follow along that path. Like when you think there's like a set meaning to life, there's a defined goal. And so you can so even if it's difficult to reach that, you know what you're reaching for. But having to assign a meaning to your own life opens up so many options for you that it's overwhelming. And that's really terrifying, because suddenly you're just like wandering aimlessly, unsure how to get to your destination or where your destination is or what your destination is, or even if there is a destination. So I think that's why a lot of people like to just go into religion, like believe a specific thing. And it's why so many people are obsessed with like the meaning of life question. What is the meaning of life? And they really want to figure that out.
Or be told.
Or be told that. They want to be told that. But a part of life and the meaning to life is about figuring that out. Like, I might not get to have the perfect life, or maybe I'll follow along this path that I've chosen for myself and get to the end and figure out it's never what I even wanted anyway. But it's also really freeing, because you don't have to give in to anyone else. You don't have to follow along a life set for you. And if you find that life that like you feel like you have to achieve is trapping, or you're not going to be happy in it, then you can just throw it out and move on. And so by deciding your own meaning to life, you're really giving that life a meaning, because part of life is just living and figuring out what that means afterwards.
Well, and you introduced a couple of concepts implicitly in what you're saying that are explicitly defined in existentialism. And one of those terms is your horizon, right? So you can imagine that as being your future possibilities. And in existential terms, a flat horizon, that is something that is completely contentless, a completely open horizon, is the most terrifying and the hardest because you have nothing to hold on to. It's just there's every possibility and every choice is open to you. And you can see in life, though, certain things limit your horizon, right? Your background, your upbringing, your biology, right? And these things curtail your horizon. And I think the existentialist is always trying to broaden that horizon and open it up. But it's terrifying at the same time.
Yeah. We hope that you enjoyed that video. And if you did, please consider checking out the next one in the series.
Or some of our other series on philosophy and life.
We upload videos every Friday, so don't forget to like and subscribe.
Like and subscribe. See you next week.